A hospital waiting room. 6 a.m. A little girl in a purple jacket sits alone, clutching a wrinkled envelope. In 3 hours, her father is supposed to be at the most important job interview of his life. Instead, he's in surgery, fighting for his life after pushing her out of the path of a speeding car. The company, Sterling Industries, one of the biggest in the state, has a strict policy: miss your interview, lose your chance. No exceptions, no second opportunities. But 8-year-old Emma Gallagher doesn't understand the word impossible. She only knows her father has sacrificed everything for 6 years to give her a life. And hidden inside that envelope is something her father has carried for decades, a secret that connects him to Sterling Industries in ways no one could imagine. A secret involving betrayal, injustice, and a truth that's been buried for 25 years. When the clock strikes 8 a.m. and her father still hasn't opened his eyes, Emma makes a decision that will change everything. She takes the envelope, walks out of the hospital, and boards a bus to the towering glass building her father has been cleaning every night for 6 years. At exactly 9 a.m., she walks up to the receptionist and says 5 words. "Dad's sick, so I came instead." What happens next will unearth a conspiracy that destroyed an innocent man, expose a villain who inherited his father's crimes, and reveal a photograph that will bring a powerful CEO to tears. Because the truth has been hiding in plain sight all along, in the hands of the janitor who cleaned her floors. The automatic doors of Sterling Industries whispered open at 8:57 a.m. Emma Gallagher stepped inside, her small sneakers squeaking softly against the polished marble floor. The lobby stretched out before her like a cathedral made of glass and steel, sunlight pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the empty space. She clutched the envelope against her chest with both hands. Her purple jacket was slightly too big, the sleeves covering half her fingers. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a ponytail that her father had tied that morning before everything went wrong. Before the car, before the screaming, before the blood pooling on the asphalt while strangers shouted into phones and her father's eyes rolled back, unconscious. Emma blinked hard, pushing the images away. She had 3 minutes. The receptionist desk sat at the center of the lobby like an island. Behind it, a young woman with dark hair and bright red lipstick was typing quickly, her fingers dancing across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. She didn't look up. Emma walked forward, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears, feel it in her throat. When she reached the desk, she was barely tall enough to see over the counter. "Excuse me," Emma said quietly. The receptionist kept typing, her eyes fixed on her screen. "Excuse me," Emma tried again, a little louder this time. The woman's fingers paused. She glanced down, and her expression shifted from mild irritation to confusion, then to something softer. Concern, maybe. "Oh, sweetie, are you lost? Where's your mom?" "I don't have a mom," Emma said simply, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "I'm here for the 9 o'clock interview." The receptionist blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "The 9 o'clock interview, for the management trainee position. My dad was supposed to come, but he got hurt last night saving me from a car. He's in surgery right now, so I came instead." The woman stared at her, mouth slightly open, as though trying to reconcile the words with the small person standing before her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The lobby's ambient sounds, the soft hum of ventilation, the distant chime of elevators, filled the silence. Then the receptionist leaned forward, her voice dropping to something gentler. "Honey, what's your name?" "Emma Gallagher. My dad is James Gallagher." The receptionist's eyes widened slightly. She glanced at her computer screen, scrolling quickly through what Emma assumed was the day's schedule. "James Gallagher, 9 a.m. interview." She looked back at Emma, her expression now a mixture of sympathy and uncertainty. "Sweetheart, I don't think you understand. This is a job interview for adults. Your dad needs to be here himself." "He would be," Emma said, her voice trembling just slightly now. the first crack in her composure. But he can't wake up yet. The doctors said he might not wake up for hours, maybe even days. But this interview is really important to him. He's been preparing for 2 weeks. He practiced his answers every night after I went to bed. I heard him through the wall, talking to himself, making sure he got everything right. The receptionist pressed her lips together, her fingers hovering uncertainly over her keyboard. She studied Emma's face, the dark circles under her eyes, the way her small hands gripped the envelope like it was the most precious thing in the world, the quiet desperation radiating from every inch of her small frame. "How did you get here?" the receptionist asked gently, her professional demeanor softening into something more human. "The number 12 bus. I've taken it with my dad before when his car wasn't working. I know how to pull the cord when it's time to get off." "Does anyone know you're here? A nurse? A family member?" Emma hesitated, then shook her head. "The nurse at the hospital thinks I'm in the bathroom. And we don't have any family. It's just me and my dad." The receptionist closed her eyes briefly, as though processing something impossible, something that required more compassion than policy could provide. When she opened them again, there was a new determination in her gaze. "Sweetheart, I need to call someone. Just wait here, okay? Don't go anywhere." She picked up the phone, pressed a few buttons, and spoke quietly, turning slightly away. Emma couldn't hear what she was saying, but she saw the woman's eyes flick toward her several times, her expression cycling through concern, disbelief, and something that might have been admiration. 2 minutes passed, then 5. Emma stood perfectly still, the envelope pressed against her chest like a shield. Around her, the building was beginning to wake up. People in suits walked past, their shoes clicking against the marble, their faces buried in phones or locked in intense conversations. No one noticed the little girl standing alone at the reception desk, a small island of stillness in a sea of purposeful motion. Then the elevator doors at the far end of the lobby opened with a soft chime. A woman stepped out, tall, dressed in a sharp charcoal suit with her dark hair pulled back into a sleek bun. Her heels clicked against the marble with the precision of a metronome. Everything about her was sharp, controlled, elegant. She moved like someone who had never wasted a single second of her life, someone who commanded rooms simply by entering them. This was Catherine Sterling. Emma had seen her picture before, in the business magazines her father sometimes brought home from the recycling bins at work. But in person, she was different, more real, more formidable. She carried herself with the kind of authority that made people step aside without her having to ask, the kind of presence that demanded attention without seeking it. Catherine walked directly to the reception desk, her eyes fixed on Emma. When she reached her, she stopped and looked down. Her expression was unreadable, professional, but Emma could feel the weight of her gaze, sharp and assessing, taking in every detail. "You're the one who says her father is James Gallagher," Catherine said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am," Emma replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "And you came here to tell me he can't make his interview." "No, ma'am. I came here to do the interview for him." Catherine's eyebrow lifted just slightly. For a moment, something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or curiosity. Then it was gone, replaced by the cool professionalism she wore like armor. "This is a place of business," Catherine said, her voice firm but not unkind. "Not a daycare. Where's your father right now?" "City General Hospital, room 304. He's in surgery. They said it could take hours, maybe longer." "And who's with you?" "Nobody. Just me." Catherine's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She glanced at the receptionist, then back at Emma. Something in her expression shifted, not softening exactly, but becoming more focused, more present, as though she was truly seeing Emma for the first time. "How old are you?" Catherine asked. 8. "And you took a bus here by yourself?" "Yes, ma'am." "The number 12. It stops right outside the hospital." I counted the stops. It was 7. Catherine studied her for a long moment. Emma could feel the weight of that gaze, like she was being measured and evaluated in ways she didn't fully understand. But she didn't look away. She met Catherine's eyes with the same determination that had carried her out of that hospital room, onto that bus, through those automatic doors. "What's in the envelope?" Catherine asked, her tone careful now, less dismissive. Emma looked down at it, then back up. "My dad's application, his resume, and some other things." "Other things?" "Yes, ma'am. Important things. Things that explain everything." Catherine crossed her arms, her posture perfect, her face revealing nothing. But Emma saw something flicker in her eyes. Interest, or perhaps recognition of something she couldn't yet name. "Emma, I'm going to be very honest with you," Catherine said, her voice taking on a different quality. Still professional, but touched now with something almost gentle. "Your father missed his interview. We have a policy here. If you're not present at the scheduled time, the opportunity is gone. Do you understand what that means?" Emma's hands tightened on the envelope. "It means you won't give him a chance. It means we have rules. Rules that keep this company running efficiently. Without rules, everything falls apart." "But what if the rules aren't fair?" Emma's voice was quiet but steady, each word carefully chosen. "What if someone really, really deserves a chance, but something bad happens that isn't their fault? What if following the rules means you miss something important? Someone important?" Catherine didn't answer immediately. Her expression remained neutral, but something in her eyes shifted, just slightly, like a door opening just a crack, letting in a sliver of light she hadn't expected. "Tell me," Catherine said slowly, her voice lower now, more private. "Why does your father want to work here?" Emma took a breath, gathering her thoughts, trying to put into words what she'd seen her father carry for as long as she could remember. "Because he's really smart," she began. "He went to college before I was born, but he had to stop when my mom died. She died having me. The doctors couldn't save her. There were complications, and she just stopped breathing. My dad was 23 years old, and suddenly he was alone with a baby. He had no family to help, no money saved up, so he dropped out of school and took whatever jobs he could find." Catherine's expression softened, just a fraction, but Emma saw it. "He's been working as a janitor for 6 years, Emma continued, her voice growing stronger. "But he never stopped learning. Every night after I go to bed, he reads business books, strategy, leadership, marketing. He has a whole notebook full of ideas about how companies can be better. He writes in it every single night, like it's the most important thing in the world." "A notebook," Catherine repeated, and Emma heard something new in her voice. Genuine interest. "Yes, ma'am. He showed me some of it once. He has ideas about employee programs and customer service, and how to make sure people feel valued. He says the best companies are the ones that remember people are human beings, not just numbers on a spreadsheet. He says you can see everything about a company's soul by how they treat the people they think don't matter." Something flickered in Catherine's eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or respect. "And he works here," Catherine said quietly, "as a janitor." "Yes, ma'am. Night shift. He cleans your offices, empties the trash, vacuums the floors, wipes down the desks. He says most people don't even see him. He's invisible, but being invisible means you see things other people miss." Catherine was quiet for a long moment. The lobby felt impossibly large around them, the silence stretching thin. "He never told anyone who he really was," Emma continued, her voice growing softer now, more vulnerable. "He just kept his head down and worked. But he always told me, 'Emma, one day things will be different. One day we'll have more than enough. One day I'll be able to give you everything you deserve.' And I know he means it. I know he would do anything for me. That's why he's in the hospital right now. Because he pushed me out of the way." Her voice broke on the last words, and tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. Catherine's expression changed completely. The professional mask cracked, and something deeply human showed through. She glanced at her watch. 9:14 a.m. "Come with me," she said quietly. Emma blinked, wiping her eyes. "What?" "I said come with me. You came all this way. The least I can do is hear what you have to say, and I want to see what's in that envelope." Emma's heart leapt. She nodded quickly and followed as Catherine turned and walked toward the elevator. The receptionist watched them go, her expression caught somewhere between shock and disbelief, her hand still hovering over the phone. Inside the elevator, Catherine pressed the button for the 15th floor. The doors closed, sealing them in a small space of polished steel and soft lighting. Emma stood beside her, the envelope still clutched tightly against her chest. She could feel Catherine's presence beside her, tall and composed, radiating a kind of quiet power that both intimidated and reassured her. "Have you eaten breakfast?" Catherine asked, her eyes fixed on the floor numbers ticking upward. "No, ma'am. When's the last time you ate anything?" Emma thought about it. "Lunch yesterday. At school. My dad was going to make dinner, but then—" Her voice trailed off. Catherine's jaw tightened. She didn't say anything, but Emma saw her hands curl into fists at her sides, knuckles going white for just a moment, before she deliberately relaxed them. The elevator chimed softly. The doors opened onto a floor of quiet offices, soft carpets, and walls made of frosted glass. Catherine led Emma down a long hallway, past cubicles where people typed and talked in hushed voices. A few looked up as they passed, their eyes widening slightly at the sight of a child walking beside the CEO. Whispers followed in their wake, but Catherine ignored them all, her stride purposeful and unwavering. At the end of the hall was a large corner office. Catherine pushed open the glass door and gestured for Emma to enter. The office was beautiful. One entire wall was made of windows overlooking the city, the skyline stretching out like something from a dream. A large desk sat near the center, neat and organized. Nothing out of place. Bookshelves lined another wall, filled with titles on business, leadership, psychology, and philosophy. Everything in the room spoke of precision, discipline, and hard-won success. "Sit," Catherine said, gesturing to one of the chairs in front of her desk. Emma climbed up into the chair. It was too big for her, her feet dangling above the floor, but she sat up straight, trying to look as professional as an 8-year-old could manage. Catherine walked to a small cabinet near the window and pulled out a bottled water and a granola bar. She handed both to Emma without a word, her face unreadable but her actions speaking of a kindness that surprised them both. "Thank you," Emma whispered. Catherine sat down behind her desk, folding her hands on the surface. Her posture was perfect, her expression composed, but Emma could see something working behind her eyes, thoughts turning, calculations being made, judgments being formed and reformed. "Now," Catherine said quietly, "tell me everything." Emma opened the water bottle and took a small sip, then set it down carefully on the desk. She unwrapped the granola bar but didn't eat it yet. Her stomach was too tight with nerves, too knotted with everything she was carrying. "My dad's name is James Gallagher," she began, her voice small but clear. "He's 31 years old. He's been a janitor here for 6 years. Before that, he worked at a grocery store and a warehouse. Before that, he was in college studying business. He wanted to be like the people who work in places like this. He wanted to build things, help companies grow, make a difference in the world." "Why did he stop?" Catherine asked, her voice gentle now, stripped of its earlier formality. "Because my mom died when I was born. There were complications during the delivery. The doctors tried everything, but they couldn't save her. My dad told me once that he held me for the first time in the same hospital where my mom took her last breath. He said it was the happiest and saddest moment of his life, all compressed into a single instant that changed everything." Catherine's expression softened, something raw and real showing through. Her eyes never left Emma's face. "He was 23 years old." Emma continued, her voice steadier now. as though telling the story was giving her strength. He had no family to help him. His mom, my grandmother, she lived far away and didn't have much money. His dad was already gone by then, so it was just him and me. A college kid with a newborn baby and no idea what to do. But he figured it out. He always figures it out. That must have been incredibly difficult, Catherine said quietly. He never made it feel difficult. He always made sure I had everything I needed. Even when we didn't have much money, even when the electricity got shut off once because he couldn't pay the bill, he always made it work. He's good at that, making things work. Making me feel safe. Catherine leaned back slightly in her chair, her eyes still focused intently on Emma. And what does your father do as a janitor here? What has he learned? He says that when you're invisible, you see things other people don't. You hear things, you notice patterns. He told me once that he's learned more about how businesses really work by cleaning offices at night than most people learn in business school. Because when people think no one's watching, they show you who they really are. Catherine's eyes sharpened, and Emma saw a new intensity in her gaze. What kind of things has he noticed? Emma hesitated, sensing that this was important somehow, that she was walking on ground that mattered more than she understood. I don't know all of it, but sometimes he writes stuff down in his notebook, about the company, about how things work, about problems he's noticed, things that don't add up. Problems, Catherine repeated, her voice careful now, measured. What kind of problems? Like inefficiencies, I think he called them. Things that don't make sense. Money stuff, mostly. But he never told me the details. He said it wasn't something a kid needed to worry about. He said grown-ups had made a mess, and he was trying to understand it, so maybe one day he could help clean it up. Catherine was quiet for a long moment, her fingers drumming softly on the desk. Then she leaned forward, her expression intent. Emma, may I see what's in the envelope? Emma nodded. She stood, walked around the desk, and handed it to her with both hands, the gesture almost ceremonial. Catherine opened it carefully, her movements precise and deliberate. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a resume, neatly typed and formatted. Catherine scanned it slowly, her eyes moving down the page. James Gallagher. Education, 2 years toward a bachelor's in business administration, unfinished. Work experience, 6 years as a custodial worker at Sterling Industries. Previous positions, warehouse associate, grocery clerk, part-time security guard. Skills, self-taught in business strategy, operations management, financial analysis. It was unremarkable, ordinary. The kind of resume that would normally be passed over without a second glance, lost in a pile of applications from people with complete degrees and impressive internships. But at the bottom, in small handwritten letters that seemed almost hesitant, was a single sentence. I may not have a degree, but I've spent 6 years studying your company from the inside. I know how to make it better. I know where the cracks are. Catherine stared at that line for a long time, something unreadable passing across her face. Then she reached back into the envelope. There was something else inside, something Emma hadn't mentioned, something heavier. It was a photograph, old, slightly faded, the corners worn soft from age and handling. Catherine pulled it out slowly, and the moment her eyes landed on it, she froze. The photograph showed 2 men standing side by side, arms around each other's shoulders, both smiling broadly. They stood in front of a building Emma recognized, Sterling Industries, though it looked different in the photo, smaller. The sign above the entrance read, Sterling Solutions, in a font that seemed almost quaint now. One of the men was younger, maybe in his early 40s, with dark hair and a kind face. His smile was genuine, reaching all the way to his eyes. The other was slightly older, with graying hair and sharp, intelligent eyes that sparkled with something like joy. Catherine's hands began to tremble. She turned the photograph over, moving with the careful precision of someone afraid of what they might find. On the back, in neat handwriting that she recognized instantly, was a message. To Thomas, my most trusted friend. We built something good together. Here's to 20 more years. Robert Sterling. August 1998. Catherine's breath caught in her throat. Her eyes moved back to the front of the photograph, to the younger man with the kind face and the genuine smile, and something inside her broke open. "Who is this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible, strangled with emotion she couldn't quite control. Emma leaned closer, looking at the photograph over Catherine's shoulder. "That's my grandfather, Thomas Gallagher, my dad's dad." Catherine looked up sharply, her eyes wide, her face pale. "Your grandfather?" "Yes, ma'am. He worked here a long time ago. Before I was born, before my dad was even grown up." "When?" The word came out harsh, desperate. "A long time ago, the 90s, I think. My dad doesn't talk about it much. It makes him too sad." Catherine's face had gone completely white. She stared at the photograph, her hands still trembling, her breath coming faster now. "And the other man? That's your dad, isn't it?" Emma said softly. "Mr. Robert Sterling. My dad showed me his picture once in a magazine article about the company's history. He said your dad and my grandpa were best friends, that they built everything together." Catherine nodded slowly, unable to speak, unable to process what she was holding in her hands. "They were friends," Emma continued, her voice small and sad. "Best friends," my dad said. "They started the company together. Well, not exactly together, but my grandpa was there from the very beginning. He helped build everything. He was like your dad's right hand, the person he trusted most in the whole world." Catherine set the photograph down carefully on the desk, as though it might shatter if she held it too tightly. She pressed her fingers to her temples, eyes closed, breathing slowly, trying to steady herself. "What happened to your grandfather?" she asked, her voice hoarse and raw. Emma's expression grew sad, her small face carrying a weight that no child should have to bear. "He went to prison." Catherine's eyes snapped open. "Prison?" "Yes, ma'am. For something he didn't do. My dad told me the story once, when I asked why I didn't have a grandpa. He said Grandpa was accused of stealing money from the company. Lots and lots of money. There was a trial, and people testified against him, and they found him guilty, even though he said he didn't do it. And then he went to prison." "When was this?" Catherine's voice was tight, controlled, but Emma could hear the emotion underneath, like magma pressing against stone. 25 years ago, 1999. I wasn't born yet. My dad was only 13 years old when they took his father away." Catherine's jaw clenched so hard Emma could see the muscles jumping. She picked up the photograph again, staring at her father's face, at the genuine affection in his eyes as he looked at the man beside him, the man who had supposedly betrayed him. "My father talked about Thomas Gallagher," Catherine said quietly, her voice breaking. "Not often. He didn't like to. But sometimes, late at night, when he'd had too much scotch and thought no one was listening, he would talk. He would say that Thomas was the smartest person he'd ever met, that Thomas had vision and integrity and loyalty that was unshakable, that he was like a brother, maybe closer than a brother." She paused, her voice breaking. "And then he would say that Thomas had betrayed him, that the person he trusted most in the world had stolen from him, had looked him in the eye and lied. It destroyed my father. He was never the same after that, never. He built walls around himself that no one could penetrate. He became harder, colder. He trusted no one completely ever again." Emma shook her head firmly, tears gathering in her eyes. "But my grandpa didn't do it. He was innocent. My dad told me. And my dad doesn't lie, ever, not even about little things." "How do you know?" Catherine asked, not unkindly, but desperately, as though she needed to believe but didn't know how. "Because my dad spent his whole life trying to prove it. That's why he's here. That's why he took this job." Catherine looked at her sharply. What do you mean? Emma took a shaky breath. My dad came here 6 years ago. He took a job as a janitor, even though he could have done other things, because this was the only way he could get inside, the only way he could look for evidence, the only way he could try to find the truth about what really happened to his father. Catherine stared at her, and Emma saw understanding dawn in her eyes, followed by something that looked like horror. He's been investigating, Catherine whispered. All this time? Yes, ma'am. Looking for anything that might prove my grandpa was innocent. Any records that were overlooked. Any patterns that didn't make sense. Anything that might show someone else did it and blamed him. Catherine stood abruptly, turning toward the window. She stood there for a long moment, her back to Emma, her shoulders rigid with tension. The city stretched out below, indifferent to the revelations unfolding in this office. What happened to your grandfather? Catherine asked again, her voice barely audible. After prison, after the conviction. Emma's voice became very small, very sad. He died there, 3 years after he went in. Heart attack. My dad said the prison doctor told them it was fast, that he didn't suffer, but my dad doesn't believe that. He said his father died of a broken heart. Died believing everyone thought he was a criminal. Died believing he'd failed his family. Catherine's shoulders shook. Emma saw her raise a hand to her face, saw the way her body trembled with emotions she was trying desperately to contain. When Catherine finally turned back, her eyes were red, tears streaming freely down her face. The professional mask was completely gone, shattered, revealing something raw and wounded underneath. My father died 8 years ago, she said, her voice breaking on every word. Heart attack. He was working late, alone in his office, because that's what he always did. He worked until his body gave out because he couldn't bear to go home to an empty house. Couldn't bear the silence, couldn't bear sitting still with his thoughts. And one of his last conversations with me, maybe the last real conversation we ever had, was about Thomas Gallagher. She walked back to the desk, picked up the photograph, held it like it was the most precious thing in the world. He told me that betrayal from a friend hurts worse than anything else in the world. That he would have rather lost everything, the company, the money, his reputation, than lose Thomas. He said Thomas was the best part of his life, and when he lost him, he lost himself too. Catherine's voice broke completely, and she sank into her chair, holding the photograph against her chest, sobbing. Emma, uncertain what to do, walked around the desk and placed her small hand on Catherine's arm. I'm sorry, she whispered. Catherine looked at her through tears, and in that moment, all the barriers between CEO and child, between adult and youth, dissolved completely. They were just two people carrying the weight of their father's pain. If Thomas was innocent, Catherine whispered, then my father died believing a lie. And I can't fix that. I can't bring him back and tell him the truth. I can't give him peace. But you can clear my grandpa's name, Emma said softly. You can make sure people know he was innocent. You can help my dad finish what he started. And maybe that's a kind of peace too. For both of them. Catherine stared at her, this small child with ancient wisdom in her eyes, and something shifted in her expression. The grief was still there, but it was joined now by something else. Determination. Purpose. A fierce resolve that hardened her features and steadied her voice. Yes, she said, wiping her eyes. Yes, I can do that. She stood, suddenly all business again, but different now. Not cold or distant, but focused, driven by something deeper than professional obligation. Where is your father right now? She asked. City General Hospital, room 304. He's probably still in surgery. Catherine grabbed her phone and her keys. Then that's where we're going. Because if your father wakes up, I want to be there. I want to look him in the eye and tell him that I believe him, that I'm going to help him find the truth. That 25 years of injustice ends today. She walked to the door and opened it, glancing back at Emma. Come on. Emma grabbed the envelope and hurried after her, hope blooming in her chest like a flower breaking through concrete. As they stepped into the hallway, a man emerged from one of the nearby offices. He was tall, in his early 50s, with salt and pepper hair and a perfectly tailored suit. His expression was smooth and confident, his smile practiced and professional. But something about his eyes made Emma uneasy. They were cold, calculating, like a predator measuring prey. "Catherine," the man said, his voice pleasant and warm, but with an edge underneath that Emma couldn't quite name. "I saw you had an unusual visitor this morning. Is everything all right?" Catherine's expression didn't change, but Emma noticed the way her jaw tightened slightly, the way her hand curled into a fist at her side before she deliberately relaxed it. "Everything's fine, Marcus," Catherine said, her voice carefully neutral, giving nothing away. "Just handling a personnel matter." Marcus's eyes flicked down to Emma, and for just a moment, less than a heartbeat, but Emma saw it. Something cold and dangerous passed through his gaze. Something that made her want to step behind Catherine, to hide from whatever calculation was happening behind those eyes. Then he smiled, and it was gone, replaced by polite curiosity. "A personnel matter involving a child. That's certainly unusual. I don't believe we've ever had that particular situation before." "It's complicated," Catherine said curtly, her tone making it clear the conversation was over. "I'll explain later." Of course. Marcus stepped aside, gesturing for them to pass with exaggerated courtesy. "I'll be in my office if you need anything. We have that board meeting at 3. Remember, some financial discrepancies we need to discuss." Something flickered in Catherine's eyes at those words, but she simply nodded. "I'll be there." As they walked past, Emma felt Marcus's eyes on her, sharp and calculating, measuring and evaluating. She glanced back once and saw him standing in the hallway, watching them, his smile gone, his expression thoughtful and cold. In the elevator, Catherine was silent. Her hands were folded in front of her, her posture perfect, but Emma could see the tension in her shoulders, the tightness around her mouth, the way her eyes were focused on something far beyond the elevator doors. "Who was that man?" Emma asked quietly as the elevator descended. "Marcus Brennan," Catherine said, her voice carefully controlled. "He's the chief operating officer, my second in command. He's been with the company for 20 years. He didn't seem nice." Catherine glanced down at her, one eyebrow raised slightly. "What makes you say that?" "The way he looked at me. Like I was a problem, like I was something that needed to be fixed or removed." Catherine didn't respond immediately, but Emma saw something flicker in her eyes. Recognition. And perhaps a confirmation of suspicion she'd been carrying but hadn't voiced. "Marcus's father worked here too," Catherine said slowly, as though choosing her words with great care. "A long time ago. He was the CFO, chief financial officer." Emma's stomach dropped, though she wasn't sure why. "When?" "The late 90s. He retired in 2000, 25 years ago." "The same time?" Catherine saw the realization on Emma's face and nodded slowly. "Yes, Richard Brennan was the CFO when your grandfather was accused." The elevator doors opened, and they stepped into the lobby. The receptionist looked up, startled, as Catherine walked past without a word, Emma hurrying to keep up with her long strides. Outside, the morning sun was bright and warm, the sky a perfect, cloudless blue. Catherine led Emma to a sleek black car parked near the entrance. A driver stood beside it, and he opened the door as they approached, his expression professional but curious. "City General Hospital," Catherine said. "Quickly, please. And, David, this is Emma. She's with me." The driver nodded. "Yes, ma'am?" They climbed inside, the leather seats cool and comfortable. The car pulled smoothly into traffic, weaving through the busy streets with practiced efficiency. Emma sat beside Catherine, the envelope still clutched in her hands. She glanced over and saw that Catherine was staring out the window, her expression distant, lost in thoughts that seemed to be pulling her further and further from the present moment. "Are you okay?" Emma asked softly. Catherine blinked as though pulled from some faraway place. She looked at Emma, and for a moment, her carefully constructed facade crumbled completely. She looked tired, sad, and very, very human. "I'm okay," she said quietly. "Just thinking about my father, about Thomas, about how much pain they both carried, all because of a lie." "Do you think Marcus's dad did it?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as though saying it too loud might make it dangerous. Catherine was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was hard, edged with something cold and angry. "I don't know, but I'm going to find out. Because if Richard Brennan framed your grandfather, then Marcus has spent 20 years protecting his father's legacy by making sure no one ever looks too closely at what really happened. And that ends now." They rode the rest of the way in silence, each lost in their own thoughts, their own fears, their own hopes for what might come next. City General Hospital loomed ahead, a massive structure of concrete and glass. The car pulled up to the main entrance, and the driver opened the door. Catherine stepped out first, then offered her hand to Emma. Together, they walked through the automatic doors and into the bustling lobby. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and cafeteria food, an oddly comforting combination that reminded Emma of when she'd had her tonsils out 2 years ago. Nurses moved quickly past, their scrubs rustling. Doctors consulted clipboards and tablets, speaking in low, urgent voices. The intercom system crackled periodically with announcements, codes and room numbers and requests for specific personnel. Catherine approached the front desk, her posture straight, her voice clear and authoritative despite the tears she'd shed less than an hour ago. "James Gallagher, room 304. The nurse behind the desk looked up, then at Emma. Recognition flickered in her eyes. "You're back. We were worried about you, sweetie. Where did you go?" "I had something I needed to do," Emma said simply. The nurse's expression softened with a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Is this your—" "A friend," Catherine said smoothly. "I'm here to check on Mr. Gallagher's condition." "Has there been any change?" The nurse glanced at her computer, typing quickly. "He's out of surgery. The procedure went well. He's been moved to recovery, but he hasn't regained consciousness yet. The doctors say it could be any time now, or it could be several more hours. The anesthesia affects everyone differently." "Thank you," Catherine said. "May we see him?" "3rd floor, room 304. Elevators are to your right." They took the elevator up, the small space filled with the soft hum of machinery and the faint smell of hand sanitizer. Emma's heart pounded as the numbers climbed. 1, 2, 3. Each floor felt like a small eternity. The doors opened onto a quieter floor, the air thick with the sounds of beeping monitors and hushed conversations between medical staff. Emma led the way down the hallway, her steps quick and sure, her small hand reaching back to take Catherine's without thinking. The gesture was unconscious, automatic, but Catherine felt something shift in her chest at the trust implied in that simple touch. This child, who had known her for less than 3 hours, trusted her completely, believed in her, had faith that she would do the right thing. Room 304 was at the end of the corridor. The door was partially open, and Emma pushed it the rest of the way. Her father lay in the bed, his eyes closed, his chest rising and falling in a slow, steady rhythm. Bandages wrapped around his torso, stark white against his pale skin. An IV line ran from his arm to a machine beside the bed, and several monitors tracked his vital signs, the steady beeping filling the quiet room. His face was bruised along one side, a dark purple spreading across his cheekbone and jaw. But he was alive, breathing, still here. Emma walked to his side and took his hand, her small fingers wrapping around his larger ones. "Hi, Dad," she whispered. "I'm here. And I brought someone to meet you. Someone important." Catherine stood in the doorway, frozen. Her eyes moved from James to the photograph she still held. comparing the man in the bed to the face she'd seen in that old picture. The resemblance was undeniable. The same strong jawline, the same gentle curve to his mouth, the same quiet strength radiating even in unconsciousness. "He looks like him," Catherine said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. Emma glanced back. "Like who?" "Like Thomas, your grandfather. They have the same eyes, the same presence. Even lying there, I can see it. The same quality my father talked about, integrity, strength that comes from somewhere deeper than muscle." Emma looked at her father's face, trying to see what Catherine saw. To her, he was just Dad, the person who made her breakfast and helped with her homework and read her stories at night. But she supposed he must look like his own father, must carry those same features forward through time, a living reminder of a man who died believing he was forgotten. Catherine stepped further into the room, her heels clicking softly against the tile floor. She moved to the opposite side of the bed and looked down at James, really seeing him for the first time. Not as a janitor, not as an employee, but as a person, a man with a history and a story and a pain that had shaped his entire life. "James Gallagher," she murmured. "All this time, you were right there, cleaning my office, walking past me in the hallways, invisible, and I never saw you, never looked close enough to see what you were carrying." She pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat down, still holding the photograph like a talisman. For a long moment, she simply sat there, her eyes fixed on James's face, her thoughts clearly far away, traveling back through years of pain and misunderstanding. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry my father couldn't save yours. I'm sorry you've had to carry this burden alone. I'm sorry it took your daughter's courage to make me see what was right in front of me all along." Emma watched her, surprised by the rawness in her voice, the genuine grief in her eyes. This woman who had seemed so cold and professional just hours ago was now crying openly, her tears falling onto the sterile hospital sheets. Catherine looked up, meeting Emma's gaze. "Your father is a remarkable man. To work in the same building where his father was destroyed, to search for the truth all these years while raising you alone, that takes a kind of courage most people don't possess, a kind of strength that can't be taught or bought." "He's the bravest person I know," Emma said simply. "I believe that." Catherine set the photograph on the table beside the bed, propping it up carefully so that James would see it when he woke. His father and hers together, smiling before everything fell apart. "When he opens his eyes," Catherine said, her voice steady now, hardened with determination, "I'll be here. And we're going to figure out what really happened 25 years ago. We're going to clear your grandfather's name. We're going to make sure the person responsible is held accountable. And we're going to make sure that history doesn't repeat itself." "Do you really think we can?" Emma asked, hope and doubt warring in her voice. Catherine's expression hardened, her professional mask sliding back into place, but different now. Not cold, but fierce, protective. "I don't just think it. I know it. Because if someone framed Thomas Gallagher, they left a trail. They always do. People think they're clever, think they can hide their crimes forever, but there's always something. Always a thread that, when you pull it, unravels everything. And I have the resources, the authority, and the motivation to find it." They settled into the quiet room, the steady beeping of monitors marking the passage of time. Emma pulled a chair close to her father's bed and sat down, never letting go of his hand. Catherine made several phone calls, stepping out into the hallway to speak in low, urgent tones. But she always came back, settling into the chair on the opposite side of the bed like she belonged there. Hours crawled by. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting machines, offering Emma juice and crackers. One kind nurse brought a blanket and draped it over Emma's shoulders when she saw the girl was shivering. At one point, a doctor came in to examine James. She was young, probably in her early 30s, with kind eyes and gentle hands. "How is he?" Catherine asked, standing as the doctor entered. Stable. The surgery went well. We repaired the internal bleeding and there's no sign of additional damage. He's very lucky. A few inches to the right and we'd be having a very different conversation. Emma's grip on her father's hand tightened. When will he wake up? Catherine pressed. Hard to say. Anesthesia affects everyone differently. Could be an hour. Could be several. His body needs rest. When he's ready, he'll wake up. The doctor left, and they were alone again. Catherine ordered lunch for both of them. Sandwiches and soup that appeared delivered by a hospital volunteer. Emma ate mechanically, her eyes never leaving her father's face. It was nearly 3 p.m. when James's fingers twitched. Emma felt it first. A small movement, barely perceptible, but there. Her breath caught. "Dad!" Catherine leaned forward, suddenly alert, her entire body tense with anticipation. James's eyelids fluttered. His breathing changed, becoming less rhythmic, more conscious, more present. His head moved slightly to the side, and a soft groan escaped his lips. Then, slowly, like someone climbing up from a deep well, his eyes opened. He blinked several times, his gaze unfocused and confused. The harsh fluorescent lights made him squint. He tried to move, but pain shot through his body, and he gasped, his face contorting. "Dad, don't move," Emma said quickly, her hand tightening around his. "You're okay." "You're in the hospital. You got hurt, but you're going to be okay." James's eyes found her face, and something shifted in his expression. Recognition, love, relief so profound it seemed to physically change his features. "Emma," he croaked, his voice rough and hoarse, barely more than a whisper. "You're okay?" "I'm fine, Dad. You saved me. The car didn't even touch me. You pushed me out of the way just in time." James's eyes closed briefly, and Emma saw tears leak from the corners, tracking down his bruised face. His throat worked as he swallowed hard. "Thank God." "Don't try to talk too much," Emma said, her own voice breaking. "Just rest. Everything's going to be okay now." But James's eyes were already moving around the room, taking in the hospital bed, the machines, the IV in his arm, trying to piece together what had happened, how much time had passed. Then his gaze landed on Catherine. He froze. His entire body went rigid, and his eyes widened with something like panic or disbelief or recognition of something terrible. He tried to sit up, grimacing as pain lanced through his broken ribs. "Who?" he started, but his voice failed him, cracking on the single word. Catherine stood slowly, her movements careful and deliberate, trying not to startle him further. "Mr. Gallagher, my name is Catherine Sterling." James's face went completely white, all the color draining away in an instant. He stared at her as though she might be a hallucination, a fever dream brought on by pain medication. "What are you? How did you? Why?" "Your daughter brought me here," Catherine said calmly, her voice gentle but firm. She gestured to the photograph on the bedside table. "And she brought me this." James's eyes moved to the photograph, and whatever color had been returning to his face drained away again. He stared at his father and Robert Sterling, arms around each other, smiling like the world was full of nothing but possibility. And Emma saw something break in him, saw 25 years of carefully constructed walls come crashing down. "Emma," he said, his voice tight and strained, barely controlled. "What did you do?" "I went to your interview," Emma said, her own voice trembling now, uncertain if she'd made a terrible mistake. "You couldn't go, so I went instead. I brought your resume envelope, the one you prepared for the interview, but I also took the old photograph, the one you keep in the back of your closet, in that small wooden box. I put it inside the envelope with the resume. I thought it might help. I thought maybe if they knew." "You shouldn't have done that," James interrupted, his voice harsh now, edged with fear. "You shouldn't have—" His voice broke, and he turned his face away, unable to continue, his shoulders shaking with emotions he couldn't control. "Why not?" Emma asked, tears spilling down her cheeks. Why didn't you ever tell anyone? Why did you keep it a secret all these years?" James was silent for a long moment. His jaw clenched so hard Emma could see the muscles jumping, see the tendons standing out in his neck. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow, drained of everything except pain and fear. "Because the people who destroyed my father are still here, still in positions of power. If they knew who I was, what I was looking for, they would destroy me too, and you." His voice broke completely. "God, Emma, they might hurt you. Don't you understand? These aren't good people. They're dangerous." Catherine's expression sharpened, her eyes narrowing. "Who, James? Who destroyed your father?" James opened his eyes and looked at her directly for the first time, and in his gaze, Catherine saw years of grief, rage, and determination compressed into a single, burning point of focus. "Richard Brennan," he said quietly, each word deliberate. "The former CFO." The name landed in the room like a physical blow, like a grenade with the pin pulled. Catherine's face went completely still, all expression draining away. Richard Brennan. Yes, Marcus Brennan's father. James nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving hers, watching for her reaction, trying to gauge whether she would believe him or dismiss him as a conspiracy theorist carrying a grudge. Catherine sank back into her chair, her hands gripping the armrests so tightly her knuckles went white. "Tell me everything. Start from the beginning. Don't leave anything out." James took a shaky breath, wincing at the pain in his ribs. Emma grabbed the cup of water from the bedside table and helped him take a sip through the straw. He nodded his thanks, then began. "My father discovered that Richard Brennan was embezzling from Sterling Industries. It started small, discrepancies in expense reports, payments to vendors that seemed inflated. But the more my father looked, the more he found. Millions of dollars over the course of several years, funneled through shell companies, disappearing into offshore accounts." Catherine leaned forward, her entire body tense, every muscle coiled with attention. "He documented everything," James continued, his voice growing stronger now, as though telling the story was giving him strength. "Built a complete case. Copies of transaction records, bank statements, testimony from vendors who'd been paid to inflate invoices. He had everything he needed to prove Richard was stealing. And he was planning to bring it all to your father." Catherine's breath caught. "When?" "September 1999. He had scheduled a meeting with Robert for Monday morning. He was going to present everything, show him the proof, recommend that Richard be terminated and prosecuted. But that didn't happen. No." James's voice was bitter now, edged with the kind of pain that never fully heals, never fully scabs over. "Because Richard found out. I don't know how. Maybe he had someone watching the files, maybe he noticed my father accessing certain records, but he knew my father was coming for him. So he struck first." "How?" "He falsified documents. Created an entire paper trail that made it look like my father was the one stealing. He took the same shell companies my father had discovered and created records showing my father had set them up. He fabricated signatures, manipulated bank records, paid witnesses to testify they'd seen my father moving money." James's hands were shaking now, his voice breaking. "By the time my father walked into that Monday meeting with your father, Richard had already poisoned the well. He'd already gone to Robert with his concerns about irregularities. He'd already presented his fabricated evidence. And when my father tried to defend himself, tried to show his own documentation, Richard claimed my father had created false evidence to cover his tracks." Catherine's face had gone pale, her eyes wide with horror. "And my father believed him. Everyone believed him. The evidence was overwhelming, meticulously crafted, every detail perfect. My father tried to fight it. Hired a lawyer with money he didn't have. But how do you fight against documents with your own signature? Against witnesses who swear under oath they saw you do it? Against bank records that show money flowing into accounts in your name?" "He was convicted," Catherine whispered. "Sentenced to 15 years. White-collar crime, they called it. Theft of company assets, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty. All the legal terms that meant everyone would believe he was a criminal. James's voice was hollow now, empty. I was 13 years old. I watched my father being led away in handcuffs, and I'll never forget the look on his face. Not anger, not even fear, just heartbreak. Because he knew Robert believed he was guilty, knew his best friend thought he was a thief, and that broke him more than the prison sentence ever could. Emma was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face as she listened to her father describe the worst moment of his life. "What happened to him?" Catherine asked, though from her expression, she already knew the answer would devastate her. "He lasted 3 years, kept to himself, tried to stay out of trouble. But prison is hard on people like him, people who are soft, who believe in rules and fairness and justice. And the knowledge that he'd been framed, that Robert believed the lie, that his name was destroyed, it ate away at him." James paused, his voice breaking completely. "He had a heart attack in the prison infirmary. They said it was fast, that he didn't suffer. But I don't believe that. I think he suffered every single day. I think he died of a broken heart, believing everyone thought he was a criminal, believing he'd failed his family." Catherine's tears were falling freely now, her professional composure completely shattered. "And you've spent your entire adult life trying to clear his name. What else could I do?" James's voice was raw, stripped of all pretense. "I was 13 when they took him away. Watched my mother fall apart, watched us lose our house, watched everything we had disappear. We ended up in a 1-bedroom apartment in the worst part of town. My mother worked 3 jobs and still couldn't keep up with the bills. She died when I was 19. Exhaustion, the doctors said. But I knew the truth. She died because they destroyed her husband, and she never recovered from that." He took a shaky breath. "So when I was old enough, when I'd saved up enough money, I came here. I took a job as a janitor because it was the only way to get inside, to see things, to watch and wait for my chance to find proof that might clear my father's name." "And did you?" Catherine asked urgently. "Did you find proof?" James's expression hardened, his eyes taking on a new intensity. "I found patterns. The same patterns my father saw 25 years ago." Catherine went very still, her entire body tensing. "What kind of patterns?" "Things people leave on their desks, whiteboards not erased properly after late-night meetings, snatches of conversations from executives working late, thinking they're alone. I've seen printouts of expense reports left by the shredder, reports for vendors I know don't actually exist because I handle the mailroom deliveries. I've seen notes about offshore accounts, names of shell companies, things scribbled on notepads and then tossed in the trash. It's the same pattern my father saw, just updated." "Who?" The word was barely a whisper, though Catherine already knew the answer. James met her eyes, and in his gaze was absolute certainty. "Marcus Brennan." The room fell into stunned silence, broken only by the steady beeping of the monitors and the distant sounds of the hospital continuing its eternal rhythm. Catherine stared at him, her face a mask of shock and growing fury. "You're telling me that my chief operating officer, my second in command, the man I've trusted for years, the man who sits beside me in board meetings and helps make decisions that affect thousands of people, is embezzling from Sterling Industries?" "Yes, just like his father did." "Yes, and I think he's been doing it for years. Maybe since the day his father retired. Maybe it's family tradition, steal from the company, frame someone else if you get caught. And you can prove this." James hesitated, his expression troubled. "I have evidence. Observations I've documented over 6 years. A notebook full of overheard conversations, dates and names from documents people threw away or left in shredders. Patterns I've identified, but do I have enough to convict him in a court of law? Alone, with only a janitor's access to discarded paper. Number. But with your authority, with a proper forensic audit that can access the actual financial systems, the transaction logs, and email records. Yes. My notes can tell you exactly where to look. We can prove it." Catherine stood abruptly, pacing to the window. She stood there for a long moment, her back to them, her shoulders rigid with tension. The afternoon sun was beginning to slant through the window, casting long shadows across the room. When she finally turned back, her face was transformed. The grief and shock were still there, but they'd been joined by something else. Something fierce and uncompromising and absolutely determined. "Your father and my father were best friends," she said, her voice steady and strong despite the tears on her cheeks. "They built something together. Something good and honest and meant to help people. And Richard Brennan destroyed that. He destroyed your father's life. He destroyed my father's peace. He poisoned a friendship that was worth more than all the money he stole. And now his son is doing the exact same thing, thinking he can get away with it just like his father did." She walked back to the bed and placed both hands on the railing, leaning forward, her eyes locked on James with an intensity that was almost physical. "History is not repeating itself," she said, each word deliberate and filled with promise. "Not this time, not on my watch, because this time we have something they don't expect. We have the truth. We have each other. We have your observations and my authority. And we have the determination to see this through no matter what it costs, no matter how long it takes." James stared at her, and Emma saw something flicker in his eyes that she'd never seen before. Hope. Real, genuine hope, after years of carrying his burden alone. "James Gallagher," Catherine said formally, her voice taking on the tone of a vow. "I am going to clear your father's name. I am going to expose Marcus Brennan and hold him accountable for his crimes and his father's crimes. I am going to make sure that Thomas Gallagher is remembered not as a criminal, but as the hero he actually was. The man who tried to stop a thief and paid the ultimate price for his integrity." James's throat worked, but he couldn't speak, couldn't find words adequate to the moment. Catherine reached out and placed her hand over his, the gesture both professional and deeply personal, a covenant being made. "And when you're well enough to leave this hospital, you're not going back to work as a janitor. You're going to help me take down the man who destroyed your family. You're going to help me finish what your father started, because you've spent 6 years searching for justice in the shadows, invisible and alone. Now it's time to bring everything into the light." Emma, who had been silent through this entire exchange, suddenly spoke up, her voice small but steady. "Are we going to be safe? If Marcus finds out what we're doing, will he try to hurt us?" Both adults turned to look at her, and Catherine saw in that small face a wisdom and fear that no child should have to carry. Catherine knelt down beside Emma's chair so they were eye level, so Emma could see the absolute sincerity in her expression. "I'm not going to lie to you, Emma. This might be dangerous. Marcus Brennan is a powerful man, and powerful men don't give up their power easily. They fight, they threaten, they try to destroy anyone who stands in their way." Emma's eyes widened, and Catherine saw fear flicker across her face. "But," Catherine continued, her voice firm and filled with a protectiveness that surprised them both, "I promise you, I will do everything in my power to protect you and your father. I will hire security if I need to. I will move you both somewhere safe if that's what it takes. You came to me for help, and I'm not going to let anything happen to you. Do you understand?" Emma nodded slowly, and Catherine saw trust in those young eyes, the kind of trust that carried immense responsibility. "You were incredibly brave to come to me today," Catherine said gently. "You did something your father had been too afraid to do. Not because he lacked courage, but because he was protecting you. And now I need you to be brave just a little bit longer. Can you do that?" "Yes," Emma whispered. Catherine stood and pulled out her phone. "I'm calling my legal team right now. We're going to start an internal investigation immediately, but we're going to do it quietly, carefully. Marcus can't know what's coming. Not yet. We need to gather everything before he has a chance to destroy evidence or run." She stepped out into the hallway, her voice low and urgent as she gave instructions. James looked at Emma, his eyes full of emotions he couldn't quite name. Pride and fear and love, all tangled together. You did something today that I've been too afraid to do for 25 years. What? Emma asked, climbing carefully onto the bed beside him, mindful of his injuries. You trusted someone, James said simply. You believed that the truth mattered enough to risk everything for it. And you were right. You were so right. And I was wrong to keep it hidden all these years. I thought I was protecting you, but maybe I was just protecting myself from hoping. Emma rested her head carefully on his shoulder, and James wrapped his arm around her, holding her close despite the pain. I'm sorry I scared you, he whispered into her hair. I'm sorry you got hurt saving me. I'd do it again, James said without hesitation. Every time. 1,000 times. You're everything to me, Emma. Everything good in my life came from you. They sat like that until Catherine returned, her face set with grim determination. It's done, she said. My legal team is already pulling records. We're going to conduct a full forensic audit of every transaction Marcus has authorized in the past 5 years. And I'm placing you on paid medical leave, effective immediately. James blinked. What? You heard me. Paid leave, full salary, and not your janitor salary. I'm backdating your employment status to what it should have been if you'd had access to the management trainee program 6 years ago. You're not going back to work until you're completely healed, and when you do go back, it won't be with a mop and bucket. Catherine, I can't accept. This isn't a request, she said firmly, her voice taking on the tone that had built an empire. This is me, correcting a wrong that's gone on for far too long. Your father was innocent. You've spent your entire adult life fighting for justice while raising your daughter alone, working a job far beneath your capabilities. Let me help you. Let me give you what should have been yours all along. Dignity, respect, and a fair chance. James's eyes filled with tears. He tried to speak, but no words came out, his throat too tight with emotion. Catherine's expression softened. My father loved yours like a brother. And when he thought Thomas had betrayed him, it broke something inside him that never healed. He died believing his best friend was a criminal, and that knowledge haunted him every day of his life. If I can give him peace now, even though he's gone, if I can honor the friendship they had by helping you, by exposing the truth, then maybe some good can come from all this pain. Maybe their friendship can mean something again. James nodded, unable to trust his voice, tears streaming down his bruised face. Catherine glanced at her watch. I need to get back to the office. I have that board meeting at 3, and I can't let Marcus suspect anything yet. But I'll be back tomorrow morning, and in the meantime, you rest. That's doctor's orders, and I don't accept excuses. She turned to leave, then paused at the door, looking back at Emma with an expression of profound gratitude. Thank you, Emma, for being brave enough to walk through my door, for trusting me with your father's story, for reminding me what true courage looks like. You're remarkable, and your grandfather would be so proud of you. Emma smiled through her tears. Will you really help us? I won't just help you, Catherine said, her voice filled with quiet intensity. I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth. About Thomas, about Richard, about Marcus, about all of it. And I'm going to make sure your father gets everything he deserves, his father's name cleared, his own career restored, and a future where he never has to be invisible again. Then she was gone, her heels clicking down the hallway, fading into the general noise of the hospital. James and Emma sat together in the quiet room, the photograph of their fathers resting on the table beside them like a blessing, like a promise that the truth was finally coming to light. Dad, Emma said softly after a long silence. Yeah, sweetheart. Are we going to be okay now? Really okay? James looked down at his daughter, this small, fierce person who had accomplished in one morning what he'd failed to do in 6 years, and he felt something shift inside him. The weight he'd been carrying for so long began, at last, to lift. Yeah, baby, he said, his voice thick with emotion and hope and the beginning of healing. I think maybe we finally are. I think maybe everything's going to be okay. And in that moment, in a hospital room with machines beeping and fluorescent lights humming overhead, two people who had spent years carrying the weight of injustice felt that burden begin to lighten, not disappear. The pain was too deep for that, the scars too permanent. But lighten, become bearable. Because sometimes, courage looks like an 8-year-old girl boarding a bus alone. Sometimes justice waits 25 years for the right moment. And sometimes the smallest voices carry the truth that changes everything. The sun was setting outside the window, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple, as though even the universe was acknowledging that something profound had shifted. That history had bent, just slightly, toward justice. And somewhere, perhaps, two old friends were finally at peace. And so, we come to the end of another journey together. It's always a little quiet after a story finishes, isn't it? I'm always curious. What feeling is this story leaving you with right now? It's incredible to think about where these stories travel. So if you feel like sharing, I'd love to see where you're tuning in from in the comments. That's the magic of this, really. Reminding us that we're all connected, all trying to figure out this messy, beautiful thing called life. If you'd like to be part of this space, where we explore those connections, consider subscribing. We're trying to build a small corner of the internet that values empathy. Thank you, truly, for lending me your time and your attention. It's a gift. Until we meet in the next story, take care of yourself and each other.